Confirm secondary clamps are engaged.
Engaged and secure. All green.
圧力大丈夫かな？
問題ありませんね。
Align the keel section now.
We need more rivets on the starboard side. Hurry up!
Secure the forward lines.
Forward line secured. Adjusting catapult alignment now.
These reports cannot be accurate.
They are, Admiral. The I-400 performed flawlessly.
It is remarkable.
January 1944. The Pacific night is still, the sea a black mirror reflecting a scattering of distant stars. A lone Japanese submarine, hull cutting silently through the water, rocks gently with the rhythm of the waves. Inside, the crew moves with measured precision, the metallic clank of tools echoing in the confined steel corridors. The air smells of diesel and salt, heavy with anticipation. On deck, a strange sight emerges. An aircraft, folded and compact, meticulously aligned with the launch catapult. Sailors tighten cables, check fuel lines, and whisper the final confirmations to the captain, whose gaze sweeps the horizon. Somewhere, beyond the calm surface, enemy ships patrol unknowingly, blind to the danger soon to erupt from beneath the waves. A solitary periscope rises and scans the horizon. The submarine hums, alive with hidden potential, a silent predator beneath a sleeping ocean. Few in the world have seen this fusion of machine and man, an aircraft launched from a submarine. Tonight, the Imperial Navy itself will witness the shocking truth. The sea no longer belongs solely to ships. From this moment, the very nature of naval warfare teeters on the edge of surprise. By 1944, the Pacific War had reached a crucial turning point. The Imperial Japanese Navy, once the pride of Asia, found itself increasingly pressed by the relentless advance of Allied forces. Battles from the Solomon Islands to the Gilbert and Marshall Chains had strained Japan's fleet, revealing vulnerabilities in its strategy. Aircraft carriers and naval aviation had proven decisive at Midway and the Coral Sea, yet Japan's long-term industrial limitations and the steady erosion of experienced pilots left commanders scrambling for innovation. Submarines, long seen as auxiliary instruments of reconnaissance and interdiction, had remained largely conventional, sail beneath, torpedo above, limited by range and stealth. In this climate, the idea of combining submarine stealth with air power took on extraordinary significance. Engineers and naval planners began to envision vessels capable not just of striking unseen beneath the waves, but of projecting air strikes thousands of miles from the Japanese homeland. The psychological weight of such an invention was immense. Japanese commanders, steeped in traditional naval doctrine, could scarcely imagine a single submarine delivering an aircraft into enemy territory, an aircraft that could strike and vanish before a response could be mounted. The concept challenged everything they knew about the limitations of sea power. The technological leap required to realize this vision was staggering. Aircraft had to be compact enough to fit into a submarine hangar, resistant to corrosion from saltwater, and capable of being assembled, fueled, and launched in a matter of minutes under the open sky. Catapults were engineered with precision to withstand the explosive force necessary to propel a plane from steel deck to air. Onboard storage demanded innovative folding wings, reinforced fuselages, and meticulous weight balancing. Each submarine became a floating laboratory, a convergence of mechanical ingenuity and naval audacity. Japanese Naval Command initially greeted these experiments with cautious optimism. Admirals recognized that conventional tactics could no longer guarantee dominance in the vast Pacific theater. A A submarine-launched aircraft promised an unprecedented edge. Reconnaissance deep into enemy-held waters, surprise strikes against distant harbors, and a strategic leverage that could force the Allies to rethink their own naval deployments. Yet skepticism remained. Could a submarine maintain stealth during aircraft assembly? Could crews perform under pressure in rolling seas? And perhaps most pressing, could this daring combination survive contact with an enemy increasingly vigilant, equipped with radar and sonar technologies the Japanese had yet to counter fully? Despite these doubts, the Imperial Japanese Navy invested heavily in research and development. Early prototypes tested smaller reconnaissance planes, sometimes with mixed results. Catapults misfired, wings failed to lock properly, and engines sputtered in salty air. Yet with each setback, engineers refined their designs, learning from every mechanical hiccup. By mid-1944, plans for the I-400 class, the largest submarine aircraft carriers ever built, were underway. These Leviathans would carry up to 3 fully armed aircraft, capable of striking targets as distant as Pearl Harbor, a bold echo of past defeats. The vision of a stealthy, airborne attack platform no longer belonged to science fiction. It was becoming a strategic reality. In parallel, the broader war situation amplified the urgency of these innovations. Allied forces were establishing air and naval superiority across the Central Pacific. Japan's outer defensive perimeter was under constant assault. Conventional surface ships, once dominant, were increasingly vulnerable to long-range air attacks and submarine patrols. Intelligence reports suggested that the United States Navy was constantly adapting, deploying radar-equipped ships and escort carriers to protect critical shipping lanes. For Japanese commanders, the stakes were clear. Without bold technological leaps, their naval forces risked being outmatched, their supply lines severed, and their homeland exposed to unprecedented aerial threat. It was within this context that the submarine aircraft program assumed a dual role, tactical and psychological. On one level, it was a weapon designed to deliver surprise attacks deep behind enemy lines. On another, it was a symbol of ingenuity and resilience, a signal to Japanese commanders that the tide of war could still be contested through audacious innovation. The sea, once a predictable battlefield, had become a stage for unforeseen surprises. Every patrol, every launch, carried the potential to shock the mind of an adversary, demonstrating that the boundaries of naval warfare were no longer defined solely by guns or torpedoes, but by imagination and courage. As these submarines slipped silently through the Pacific, carrying their strange airborne cargo, the stage was set. The moment of revelation, the first true operational deployment of aircraft from submarines, was approaching, and when it came, the commanders who had long relied on conventional doctrine would be forced to confront a new reality, one that would forever alter the perception of naval power and the very nature of war at sea. By mid-1944, the I-400 class submarine had moved from concept to reality, representing the apex of Japanese naval innovation. These massive vessels, over 120 meters in length, displacing more than 5,900 tons submerged, were unlike anything the world had seen. Inside their reinforced hulls lay a cylindrical hangar, capable of storing 3 specially designed IEM-6, a Siren aircraft. These planes were engineered with folding wings and tail sections to fit within the submarine's confined interior, yet they retained full operational capability once launched. Every detail of their design reflected a singular ambition, the ability to strike anywhere across the Pacific, silently, unseen, and without warning. Construction of these submarines was a Herculean engineering task. Shipyards in Kure and Sasebo labored under strict secrecy, using innovative techniques to integrate the hangar, catapult system, and onboard maintenance facilities. The vessels needed immense fuel capacity to traverse thousands of miles, sophisticated pressure hulls to withstand deep dives, and complex launch mechanisms capable of handling planes weighing over 3,500 kilograms each. Every nut, bolt, and hydraulic system was tested under extreme conditions, from rolling seas to sudden storms, because failure in the open ocean could mean catastrophic loss. The IEM-6A aircraft itself was a marvel of adaptation. Compact yet lethal, the Siren could carry bombs, torpedoes, or even fuel for long-range strikes. Its folding design allowed rapid assembly, approximately 7 minutes under ideal conditions, yet required a crew that trained tirelessly to master the process in darkness, under constant threat of detection. Engineers had to ensure that salt water did not corrode the airframe, that the fuel lines remained functional, and that the catapult could launch the plane at precise speed and angle for a successful takeoff. In essence, each submarine was both a warship and an airborne aircraft carrier, a dual-purpose weapon of unprecedented complexity. Japanese Naval Command viewed these submarines as strategic equalizers, with conventional carriers increasingly vulnerable to Allied air power. The ability to launch strikes from hidden platforms offered a potential psychological and tactical edge. Intelligence officers envisioned missions that could disrupt supply lines, bomb distant ports, or even attack the continental United States. Yet the commanders were not naive. They understood that operational success depended not just on engineering brilliance, but on flawless coordination, timing, and stealth. A single error in assembly, launch, or navigation could doom both crew and aircraft, making every patrol a high-stakes endeavor. Secrecy was paramount. Knowledge of these submarines' existence was tightly controlled, with only the highest-ranking officers privy to their full capabilities. Even among those who served aboard, few understood the strategic scope of the program. Submarines traveled under strict radio silence, with operations planned down to the last second. The Japanese Navy invested heavily in training, running repeated drills to perfect rapid aircraft assembly, launch, and recovery. Crews endured long, monotonous voyages punctuated by moments of intense precision work, their psychological resilience tested alongside their technical skill. The broader strategic environment added urgency to these developments. By 1944, the Allies had gained dominance in naval aviation, with long-range bombers and carrier-based planes projecting power across vast distances. Japan's outer defensive perimeter, once thought secure, was under constant pressure. Submarine-launched aircraft represented not only a chance to regain initiative, but a method to counter the overwhelming firepower of the Allies through surprise and stealth. Every mission was calculated not just for damage inflicted, but for the psychological impact on enemy commanders who, upon witnessing an aircraft emerging from the sea, would confront a reality that defied conventional doctrine. Even within the Japanese command, skepticism lingered. Admirals debated the practicality of the program. Some questioned whether such complex vessels could operate effectively under the duress of war, or whether the effort would be better spent reinforcing conventional naval strength. Others warned that detection by Allied radar or intelligence could nullify the advantage entirely. Yet those who had witnessed successful test launches at sea recognized the potential. A submarine, hidden beneath the waves, could now deliver a strike from 1,000 miles away, an opportunity to reshape naval engagements and project power in ways never before possible. By late 1944, the stage was set. The first operational crews were trained, the submarines commissioned, and the Siren aircraft fully integrated. Japan possessed a weapon that combined the silent menace of the ocean with the striking capability of aviation, a fusion of stealth and surprise that would soon shock both its commanders and, potentially, the Allies. These vessels, the I-400 class and their counterparts, were more than machines. They were statements of ingenuity, desperation, and the audacious human desire to bend the laws of war, to one's will. From this point, every patrol, every launch carried the potential to challenge doctrine, redefine strategy, and test the resolve of those who believed the oceans were safe from the unseen power of the submarine. It was against this backdrop that the first true operational deployments would unfold, setting the stage for a moment that would leave Japanese commanders stunned and forever alter the perception of naval warfare. The first perspective to consider is the human experience aboard these submarines. Life beneath the waves was claustrophobic and tense. Crews lived in cramped steel corridors, the air heavy with diesel fumes and the constant hum of engines. Sleep was scarce. Routines were punctuated by the maintenance of machinery, preparation for aircraft assembly, and drills repeated countless times. Yet beneath the routine, there existed a palpable sense of purpose. Sailors knew they were part of an unprecedented experiment in naval warfare. Every movement mattered, every bolt tightened, every calculation verified. The launching of an aircraft was a test not only of machinery, but of human skill, coordination, and nerves. The anxiety was tangible. A single misstep, an improperly folded wing, a misaligned catapult, a delay in engine ignition could spell disaster. Yet amidst this pressure, there was awe. Few men in history had ever witnessed a plane emerge from the belly of a submarine, a living testament to the blend of ingenuity and human courage. From a tactical angle, the submarine-launched aircraft represented a radical shift in naval operations. Traditionally, submarines were hunters of merchant and warships, operating largely within the confines of stealth torpedo attacks. Aircraft, in contrast, offered reconnaissance, speed, and long-range strike capability. By combining the two, the Japanese Navy created a platform capable of performing missions previously considered impossible. Reconnaissance flights could cover thousands of miles, providing intelligence on Allied fleet movements, base locations, and logistical hubs. Surprise attacks could bypass conventional naval defenses, reaching targets beyond the horizon. The tactical implications were enormous. Commanders could plan strikes on distant harbors, sabotage supply lines, and test the morale of enemy forces, all without committing large surface fleets to battle. It was a new form of asymmetric warfare, one that leveraged technology and cunning to offset the numerical and material superiority of the Allies. The technological perspective reveals the extraordinary ingenuity behind this program. The I-400 class and the Siren aircraft were marvels of engineering. Every component was designed for maximum efficiency under extreme conditions. The catapult system alone required precise calculations to ensure that aircraft could launch successfully from a rolling, submerged platform. The folding mechanisms of the Siren's wings and tail were intricate, yet robust enough to withstand repeated assembly and disassembly. Engineers had to account for the corrosive effects of salt water, the stresses of rapid acceleration, and the delicate balance required for flight immediately after launch. Fuel and ordnance storage added another layer of complexity. The crew had to handle explosives in confined spaces while maintaining readiness for sudden deployment. This fusion of technology represented the pinnacle of wartime innovation, a physical manifestation of the Japanese Navy's desperation and creativity. Even the smallest details carried significance. Instruments had to be compact but precise. Tools had to function flawlessly in rolling seas. Human coordination had to synchronize perfectly with mechanical processes. The success of each mission depended on this harmony. In a war dominated by brute force and industrial might, the submarine aircraft program demonstrated that ingenuity and precise engineering could redefine operational capability. It challenged assumptions about the limits of naval warfare, forcing both Japanese commanders and their potential enemies to rethink strategy in the face of unprecedented technology. The human, tactical, and technological angles were deeply intertwined. The crew's skill and resilience enabled the tactical application of aircraft launches, while the sophistication of the technology amplified both human potential and strategic reach. Each perspective reinforced the others, creating a composite force that was more than the sum of its parts. The submarine itself was not just a vessel. It was a stage where human courage, tactical audacity, and engineering brilliance converged. For the Japanese commanders observing these developments, the implications were profound. Their sailors were performing acts that seemed almost impossible, pilots and crew turning theory into deadly reality. The success of a launch could yield critical intelligence or strike a distant port, but failure could end in disaster, revealing the crew's vulnerability and the stakes of innovation under wartime pressure. This tension between risk and reward underscored every mission, every decision, and every calculated maneuver. The stage was now set for the broader strategic, leadership, and moral dimensions of these operations, where the shock of submarine-launched aircraft would ripple through the minds of commanders and alter the conduct of war at sea. From a perspective of leadership, the advent of submarine-launched aircraft posed a profound challenge to Japanese commanders. Admirals and senior officers, schooled in decades of naval tradition, were suddenly confronted with a weapon that defied conventional understanding. Fleets that once dominated the seas through sheer firepower now faced a threat emerging from below the waves. A stealthy, airborne strike launched with near-perfect secrecy. Commanders had to weigh the potential of these new submarines against the risk of operational failure. Decisions about deployment, mission prioritization, and coordination with other fleet elements became exercises in balancing audacity with caution. A successful strike could demonstrate technological mastery and strategic ingenuity, reinforcing morale within the command. Yet failure, whether through mechanical error, enemy detection, or misjudgment, could expose not only the vessel and crew, but the credibility of the entire naval leadership. The enemy angle reveals the unforeseen psychological and strategic impact on Allied forces. Though Allied intelligence eventually became aware of Japan's submarine aircraft program, the first operational deployments caught many by surprise. The idea that a single submarine could project air power across vast distances challenged preconceptions of naval security. Radar-equipped ships, patrol aircraft, and fortified harbors, all considered relatively secure, were now vulnerable to strikes from below the surface. For Allied commanders, the prospect of an enemy aircraft materializing from the ocean itself was both tactical and psychological. It introduced uncertainty into operational planning, forcing the Allies to reconsider defensive measures, extend reconnaissance coverage, and account for a threat that blended stealth and reach in a way previously unimaginable. This element of surprise amplified the weapon's value far beyond the number of aircraft actually deployed. The mere knowledge that such a capability existed imposed caution, fear, and distraction. The moral and psychological angle also demands attention. The deployment of these submarines, carrying aircraft capable of long-range strikes, introduced profound stress for Japanese crews and commanders alike. Sailors were acutely aware that each mission carried extraordinary risk. The ocean could become one moment and deadly the next. A sudden storm or mechanical failure could end a mission in disaster. Yet this stress was coupled with a sense of pride and responsibility. Crews understood that their success represented not only tactical impact, but national significance. Similarly, for the commanders on the receiving end, both Japanese and Allied, the psychological shock of witnessing aircraft launched from submarines was immense. It challenged their assumptions about the rules of engagement, the predictability of the sea, and the limits of human ingenuity. The sight of a plane rising from the waves could induce awe, fear, and a momentary paralysis of strategic thinking, a rare and potent advantage in war. These angles converge to highlight the revolutionary nature of the program. Human courage enabled complex, high-stakes operations. Technology provided the tools for unprecedented projection of power. Tactical planning translated potential into reality. Leadership decisions navigated risk and reward. The enemy's perception amplified impact, and the moral and psychological dimensions reinforced the significance of each operation. This was more than a weapon. It was a multidimensional force, capable of reshaping strategic calculations and altering the behavior of adversaries. The fusion of these perspectives also underscores the broader lesson of innovation in warfare. In an era dominated by battleships, carriers, and industrial capacity, the submarine aircraft program demonstrated that creativity, engineering skill, and human resolve could achieve effects that brute strength alone could not. Even a small number of successful launches could have disproportionate consequences, forcing both Japanese and Allied commanders to adapt in real time, adjusting tactics, reallocating resources, and revising intelligence priorities. The weapon's impact lay not only in its destructive potential, but in its ability to challenge assumptions, seize initiative, and redefine the boundaries of the possible. As the first operational missions approached, Japanese commanders were poised at the intersection of fear, excitement, and uncertainty. They had invested time, resources, and human capital into a program that tested the limits of both machine and mind. The Allies, meanwhile, remained largely unaware of the precise capabilities of these submarines, leaving a window of surprise and strategic advantage. When these vessels finally moved into operational theaters, the convergence of human skill, tactical audacity, technological brilliance, leadership calculation, and psychological impact would create a turning point, one that would shock commanders and crews alike, leaving a lasting imprint on the history of naval warfare. The stage was now fully set for the climax/turning point, where the first operational deployments of submarine-launched aircraft would demonstrate their true potential and deliver the shock that gave this program its historic significance. The night of the first operational mission arrived with quiet intensity. October 16, 1944. The I-400 class submarine I-400 slipped through the darkened waters of the Pacific, its massive hull slicing silently beneath the waves. Every crew member moved with precise efficiency, hands steady despite the weight of history pressing on their shoulders. On deck, the Aichi M6, a Siren aircraft, lay folded, a mechanical promise of unprecedented power, each rivet and cable meticulously inspected under the dim glow of lanterns. The air was thick with anticipation, diesel fumes, and the tang of salt. Outside, the ocean stretched into endless blackness, calm yet merciless, a canvas for an act of war no one had ever truly witnessed. Inside the command compartment, officers consulted charts and calculations, coordinating the launch window with uncanny precision. Timing was everything. The submarine had to surface in a location free from Allied patrols, align with the wind, and maintain stability long enough for assembly. The crew worked in near silence, punctuated only by the rhythmic pounding of the waves against the hull. 7 minutes, the time it took to unfold, fuel, and arm the aircraft, would determine success or catastrophe. Each second was measured, each movement rehearsed countless times in simulations, yet the stakes had never felt higher. Finally, the catapult was readied. The Siren's wings and tail locked into place. The engine roared to life, a sound almost alien in the quiet night. For a fleeting moment, the crew held their collective breath. Then, with a mechanical hiss and explosive surge, the aircraft shot into the sky, lifting off from a vessel hidden beneath the Pacific's black surface. For the Japanese commanders observing remotely via careful reconnaissance and intermittent reports, it was a moment of astonishment. A plane had emerged from a submarine, an idea they had conceived only in theory, now realized with terrifying precision. The tactical impact of this launch was immediate. Allied reconnaissance in the region detected nothing until the aircraft was airborne, miles away from the submarine. The element of surprise was total. From the vantage of the submarine, the Siren could strike enemy shipping, scout harbors, or return with intelligence. Missions previously impossible without alerting the enemy. For commanders aboard the I-400, the sense of accomplishment was electric, tempered by the recognition that danger remained ever-present. A sudden storm, mechanical failure, or unexpected enemy patrol could nullify months of preparation in an instant. News of the first operational launches, when they reached higher echelons of the Japanese Navy, produced reactions ranging from astonishment to disbelief. Admirals who had doubted the practicality of the program were confronted with undeniable proof. Their ingenuity had yielded a weapon capable of projecting power thousands of miles from Japan, with minimal risk to surface vessels. Reports described the aircraft emerging like a bird from the ocean, a phrase that captured both the elegance and shock of the moment. The successful deployment of the Siren validated years of development, experimentation, and human endurance. Yet the first missions were only the beginning. Operationally, crews faced the challenge of coordinating multiple launches, navigating open ocean, and returning aircraft safely if reconnaissance was part of the mission. Each flight tested the crew's discipline and the vessel's engineering limits. Catapults were calibrated down to the millimeter. Wind, tide, and ocean swell had to be accounted for. Sailors who had trained for months now performed under real combat conditions, aware that a single miscalculation could result in loss of life and strategic failure. The tension was palpable, the stakes immediate, and the consequences total. The Allies, largely unaware of the full capabilities of these submarines, were ill-prepared for the implications. Radar and patrols, while advanced, could not anticipate aircraft suddenly emerging from the sea. In practice, even a single successful sortie disrupted enemy planning. Japanese commanders understood that the psychological impact on the enemy could exceed the physical damage inflicted. A fleet that believed itself secure could no longer operate with the same confidence. Every sortie carried the potential to instill doubt, forcing the Allies to rethink defensive strategy across the Pacific. The convergence of human skill, technology, and tactical daring reached its apex in these first operational missions. Sailors executed procedures honed through months of repetitive drills. Aircraft performed flawlessly under extreme conditions. Commanders witnessed proof that innovation could alter the balance of naval power. The moment was cinematic in its simplicity and devastating in its implications. The submarine, once a silent hunter beneath the waves, had become a carrier of the sky, a platform for surprise, and a tool to shock both friend and foe alike. As the first aircraft completed its mission and returned safely, or in some cases, struck distant targets, the Japanese Navy could finally measure the program's strategic potential. The reactions were unanimous: astonishment, pride, and the dawning realization that conventional assumptions about naval warfare had been shattered. Commanders, once skeptical, now faced the exhilarating challenge of integrating this new weapon into broader operational plans, understanding both its power and its limitations. The first operational flights of submarine-launched aircraft had proven the concept. They demonstrated that stealth, speed, and ingenuity could combine to create a weapon capable of surprising even the most vigilant enemy. And yet, this was only the beginning. The next missions, larger in scale and higher in consequence, would bring the full force of this innovation to bear. And the true turning point of the program, the moment that would leave Japanese commanders stunned, was still approaching. By late 1944, the I-400 class submarines had entered full operational readiness, and the stage was set for their first major missions. One of the most audacious planned operations involved reconnaissance and potential strikes against the Allied stronghold at Ulithi Atoll, a critical anchorage supporting the U.S. Navy's advance through the Pacific. Japanese commanders meticulously calculated timing, positioning, and fuel logistics. Each vessel's course was plotted to avoid known Allied patrol routes, while the Syrian aircraft were inspected and fueled with surgical precision. Every step reflected the stakes. Success could deliver intelligence or strikes that might alter strategic calculations, while failure could expose Japan's most secretive and technologically advanced weapon. On December 24, 1944, I-400 surfaced under the cover of darkness. The crew moved with practiced urgency, unfolding the first siren for launch. The submarine rolled gently with the swell, the hum of the engines mingling with the ocean's whisper. Officers checked gauges and wind calculations, while sailors secured the catapult and tested fuel lines. Moments later, the aircraft roared to life, lifting from the deck and vanishing into the black night. To Japanese commanders monitoring the operation, the spectacle was surreal. A plane, launched from a vessel submerged for days beneath thousands of tons of water, had crossed hundreds of miles to reconnaissance territory previously considered unreachable. The psychological shock was immediate. For even the most confident leaders, this demonstrated a level of operational ingenuity few could have imagined. As the missions unfolded, reports began filtering back. Aircraft executed long-range reconnaissance over Ulithi, capturing photographic intelligence of anchored fleets and supply depots. The plane's ability to return to the submarine, though requiring precise navigation and timing, further validated the program. For the first time, Japanese Naval Command could see the practical utility of the I-400 class beyond theoretical exercises or training drills. The combination of stealth, range, and surprise challenged their own expectations of what naval power could achieve. Admirals, who had once doubted the feasibility of launching aircraft from submarines, were now forced to reconsider strategic doctrine. The sea was no longer a predictable battlefield. It had become a domain where innovation could defy logic and disrupt conventional planning. Yet these operations were not without peril. Submarines had to surface long enough to assemble and launch aircraft, exposing themselves to the ever-present threat of Allied patrols. Mechanical issues could jeopardize the delicate balance of the vessel and the mission. Navigating the vast Pacific under radio silence required near-perfect execution. Crews worked under immense psychological strain, aware that mistakes could be fatal. Each successful sortie represented a triumph, not just of engineering, but of human resilience, discipline, and coordination. The shock experienced by commanders was mirrored by the sailors themselves, who had transformed theory into reality under conditions most would consider impossible. The strategic implications reverberated across Japanese command. These missions demonstrated that, even in the face of mounting losses and diminishing resources, Japan could leverage ingenuity to create a temporary advantage. The I-400 program allowed commanders to envision a scenario in which distant Allied bases could be threatened without committing large fleets to vulnerable surface operations. In theory, it offered a means to disrupt supply lines, gather critical intelligence, and force the Allies to divert resources to defend areas previously thought secure. The psychological impact was as significant as the tactical one. The very knowledge that a single submarine could deliver a plane thousands of miles from Japanese shores unsettled commanders and crews alike, forcing them to confront a reality in which the oceans themselves were no longer predictable or safe. One particularly striking moment occurred during simulated coordinated attacks involving multiple I-400 class submarines. While still in training exercises, observers noted the precision of simultaneous launches. Aircraft lifted from the sea like birds from a hidden nest, flying in formation toward distant targets. The visual and operational impact was profound. Japanese officers recorded astonishment at the sight of multiple aircraft emerging from submarines at once, a demonstration that exceeded even the most ambitious expectations of the program. The lessons were clear. Through meticulous planning, human skill, and technological mastery, the impossible had become feasible. These operational successes left Japanese commanders stunned. Reports describe a mixture of pride, disbelief, and cautious optimism. For decades, naval strategy had emphasized surface fleets, carriers, and large-scale engagements. Now, a silent submarine beneath the waves could deliver aircraft capable of reconnaissance or strikes across hundreds of miles. The novelty of the tactic, combined with its practical execution, forced a re-evaluation of naval doctrine. Commanders realized that in the vast, unpredictable Pacific, innovation could temporarily level the playing field against numerically and technologically superior forces. By the end of the first operational campaigns, the I-400 class had proven its concept. Submarines had launched aircraft, gathered intelligence, and returned to port without detection. The shock to Japanese commanders was not simply the technical accomplishment, but the validation that their audacious investment in innovation had borne fruit. In the minds of those officers, the possibilities now seemed limitless. Yet even as they celebrated these victories, the broader context of war, the overwhelming Allied advance, logistical strain, and vulnerability of the fleet remained unchanged. The I-400 program had delivered a moment of strategic brilliance, a turning point that would forever alter perceptions of submarine warfare, but could not reverse the trajectory of a war already tilting decisively against Japan. These events set the stage for the aftermath, where the consequences of these missions, both operational and psychological, would unfold, revealing not only the impact on Japanese commanders, but the broader implications for naval strategy, morale, and the evolving nature of warfare. The first operational deployments of the I-400 class submarines had achieved more than mere reconnaissance or experimental strikes. They delivered a profound shockwave through the Imperial Japanese Navy. Officers who had long debated the feasibility of such operations now faced undeniable proof. Their audacious vision had been realized. Reports described the launches as astonishing and beyond expectation, capturing the sheer novelty of aircraft rising from the ocean surface. Admirals who had previously doubted the program now recognized its potential to disrupt enemy assumptions and extend Japan's reach in ways traditional carriers could not. The psychological impact on commanders, both strategic and tactical, was immediate. The sea, long considered a predictable stage of naval warfare, had become a platform for unprecedented surprise. Operationally, the missions confirmed that the combination of submarine stealth and airborne power was viable. Crews executed launches with remarkable precision. The Siren aircraft performed reliably under extreme conditions, covering hundreds of miles to gather intelligence and, in some cases, simulate strike operations. The meticulous preparation, rigorous training, and technological innovation coalesced to produce results that, on paper, had once seemed impossible. The successful deployment validated years of engineering ingenuity and human endurance, reinforcing confidence in both the program and the sailors tasked with executing it. Yet the aftermath was not purely celebratory. The operations exposed the extreme complexity and risk inherent in the program. Submarines had to surface in potentially hostile waters, leaving them vulnerable to enemy detection. Every mission demanded flawless execution. A single mechanical failure or navigational error could result in catastrophic loss. For commanders, these vulnerabilities were sobering. While the strategic potential was immense, so too was the danger of over-reliance on a single innovative system in a theater dominated by Allied air and naval supremacy. In many ways, the I-400 program represented a high-wire act, brilliant in design, but perilously close to failure if conditions deviated even slightly from expectation. The psychological effect on the crews themselves was equally profound. Sailors and airmen who had spent months training for these precise operations experienced a mix of exhilaration, pride, and tension. They had achieved feats no other navy had attempted, yet they were constantly aware that a single error could undo all their efforts. The combination of danger and accomplishment forged an intense esprit de corps, tempered by the constant reminder of mortality in wartime conditions. The human cost of innovation, long hours, confined spaces, and relentless pressure was inseparable from the operational success of the missions. Meanwhile, intelligence officers and commanders within the Japanese Navy began to re-examine broader strategic planning. The demonstrated reach of submarine-launched aircraft suggested that distant enemy bases could be threatened with minimal surface presence. Tactical doctrines were reassessed, considering not only the potential for offensive operations, but also the defensive challenges posed by deploying such vessels. The novelty of the weapon also imposed a unique psychological advantage. The Allies had yet to fully comprehend the capabilities of these submarines, creating a temporary strategic ambiguity. This uncertainty amplified the operational value of each sortie, proving that surprise and perception could rival sheer firepower and influence. However, the broader context of the Pacific War tempered this optimism. By late 1944, Japan was under relentless pressure across multiple fronts. The Allied advance in the Marianas, the Philippines, and elsewhere had begun to erode Japanese supply lines and naval dominance. Even as the I-400 program demonstrated technological brilliance, it could not compensate for the overwhelming material superiority of Allied forces. Japanese commanders were left balancing pride in their innovation with the sobering realization that, despite the success of these missions, the trajectory of the war remained against them. The immediate aftermath left an indelible mark on naval thought. The I-400 class had proven that submarines could project power in ways previously unimaginable, blending stealth, ingenuity, and airborne capability. The missions shocked Japanese commanders into a new understanding of naval potential, forcing them to grapple with both the promise and the limits of technology under wartime conditions. As the war pressed forward, these lessons would influence operational planning, morale, and the perception of risk, not only for those who served aboard the submarines, but for the broader command structure that had invested in this extraordinary program. From these initial deployments, one truth emerged clearly. Innovation could surprise even seasoned commanders, disrupt enemy assumptions, and leave an enduring imprint on strategy and morale. Yet, in the unforgiving calculus of total war, brilliance alone was never enough to alter ultimate outcomes. The I-400's flights were a testament to human ingenuity and courage, a fleeting advantage against an overwhelming tide. And with these missions complete, the stage was set for the second phase of the aftermath, examining the long-term strategic and operational consequences for the Imperial Japanese Navy, its commanders, and the Pacific theater as a whole. The operational success of the I-400 class submarines left a lasting imprint on Japanese naval strategy, even as the broader war turned increasingly against the empire. While the submarines demonstrated remarkable ingenuity, their impact was ultimately constrained by the realities of an overstretched fleet and dwindling resources. Japanese commanders, having witnessed the first operational flights, now faced the challenge of integrating this new capability into a naval doctrine that had long relied on surface power, carriers, and battleship engagements. The I-400's presence reshaped strategic thinking, forcing consideration of surprise attacks, distant reconnaissance, and unconventional strike missions, concepts previously secondary in Imperial Navy planning. Commanders recognized that the combination of stealth and airborne reach offered a temporary strategic advantage, but one that could not compensate for the overwhelming Allied material superiority. Supply lines were under constant threat, experienced pilots were scarce, and Allied air and naval dominance limited the operational theater for these submarines. Even as pride swelled in the innovation of the I-400 program, officers acknowledged that a single technological breakthrough could not reverse the course of a conflict defined by industrial scale and strategic positioning. Yet the psychological and tactical lessons were invaluable. The possibility of a weapon appearing unexpectedly from the sea altered the way commanders evaluated risk, positioning, and the element of surprise in future operations. The long-term consequences for operational doctrine were clear. The program illustrated that innovation could create tactical shock, disrupt enemy assumptions, and project power asymmetrically. Lessons from I-400 deployments informed subsequent submarine design considerations, emphasizing modularity, stealth, and versatility. Japanese officers took note of the importance of crew training under extreme conditions, rapid aircraft assembly, and coordinated launch operations, skills that could be applied to other naval and aviation programs. The submarines demonstrated that technological ingenuity, paired with disciplined execution, could extend influence far beyond the apparent limitations of traditional platforms. Allied forces, too, were indirectly impacted by these operations. Although early missions were largely unnoticed in real time, intelligence reports eventually revealed the potential scope of Japan's submarine aircraft program. The existence of vessels capable of launching aircraft from beneath the ocean challenged Allied planning and introduced a layer of uncertainty to operational theaters previously considered secure. Defensive protocols, reconnaissance strategies, and fleet positioning were gradually adjusted in response to the possibility of sudden, unconventional attacks. Even without a direct strike on major bases, the mere knowledge of these submarines' capabilities created a psychological ripple, forcing planners to allocate resources to counter a threat that had never fully materialized in destructive scale. The human element also left its mark. Crews who had executed these missions gained a sense of historical significance. Their role was a testament to courage, precision, and perseverance under conditions of extraordinary risk. For commanders, the experience underscored the delicate balance between technological ambition and operational pragmatism. Innovation could inspire awe, instill fear in the enemy, and provide fleeting tactical advantage, but it remained subordinate to broader strategic realities. In the case of the I-400 class, the missions had been spectacular in execution, yet they arrived too late in the war to alter the trajectory of defeat for Japan. In a broader historical context, these events foreshadowed the evolving nature of naval warfare. The integration of submarines and aircraft, combining stealth with mobility and long-range projection, anticipated post-war developments in missile submarines, carrier operations, and rapid strike capabilities. The I-400 class represented a bridge between traditional naval power and the era of multidimensional warfare, demonstrating how innovation could redefine what was possible in maritime strategy. Ultimately, the aftermath of these operations was a mixture of pride, astonishment, and sobering realism. Japanese commanders had been shocked, in the truest sense, by the demonstration of human ingenuity and technical mastery. The submarines had proven the concept, validated countless hours of design and training, and introduced a new dimension of warfare. Yet even as the tactical brilliance of the missions was celebrated, the limitations imposed by strategic context, the relentless advance of Allied forces, logistical strain, and dwindling resources remained unavoidable. The I-400 class, in its fleeting triumph, offered a glimpse of what naval innovation could achieve, leaving a legacy that would inform both history and the future of warfare at sea. These lessons of ingenuity, audacity, and tactical surprise set the stage for the reflection/closure, where the significance of these events will be examined not only in terms of strategy, but also their philosophical and human implications. The story of the I-400 class submarines and their aircraft is, at its core, a testament to human ingenuity in the face of overwhelming odds. In the darkness of the Pacific night, Men moved with quiet precision. Machinery hummed beneath waves, and fragile aircraft rose from steel hulls to defy expectation. These moments captured something essential about warfare. It is not only battles, numbers, or firepower that shape outcomes, but also imagination, courage, and the audacity to challenge convention. For Japanese commanders, the first operational flights were a revelation. The sight of an aircraft emerging from a submerged vessel forced a reevaluation of what naval power could be, challenging deeply held assumptions and creating a fleeting strategic advantage. Yet this shock was tempered by reality. The submarines, remarkable as they were, could not reverse the tide of a war defined by material scale, industrial might, and relentless pressure from an increasingly dominant enemy. In this tension lies the lesson. Innovation can inspire, disrupt, and redefine the battlefield, but it is never an absolute solution. The legacy of the program extends beyond the immediate outcomes of World War II. These missions foreshadowed the evolution of modern naval warfare, where submarines, aircraft, and missiles intersect in multidimensional strategies. The I-400 class represents a bridge between eras, a reminder that the combination of technology and human skill can achieve feats previously considered impossible. It also underscores the human element. Bravery, discipline, and collaboration under extreme pressure are as critical as the machines themselves. In the end, the shock felt by Japanese commanders was not only to their understanding of technology, but to the very nature of war. The oceans, once predictable, had become arenas of surprise and innovation. The story of submarine-launched aircraft reminds us that even in the darkest hours, creativity and courage can leave a lasting imprint on history. The sea, the sky, and the men who navigate both became a testament to human possibility, one fleeting yet unforgettable moment in the vast narrative of World War II.